Okay, so number 5 asks you to write a method. The method was called int. Well, it wasn't called. It returns an int, and it was called get count blue over value, and it's passed some integer value. So basically, the idea is you need to traverse your entire pixel array, your two-dimensional pixel array, and detect if the pixel value of the setting for blue is over a certain value. If it is, we want to add that to our count of pixels that have, high blue or blue above a certain value. So obviously this is going to need a nested for loop to traverse all the values, and I think we could use a for each loop, or we could use our other for loops. It doesn't have to be the enhanced one. But let's go ahead and write our method header. I'm going to make this a public method, public. And it returns an int, and it's called get count blue over value, and it will be passed a particular int value. So let's say that the value is 100. Every single time you encounter a pixel that has a blue setting more than 100, you need to increase your count by 1. In fact, speaking of increasing count by 1, we probably need a variable that's going to keep track of how many times blue was over a certain value. So I'm going to call it count, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. The other thing that we need to do is we need to grab our pixel array. Remember, this method is like in our labs. This is something that's being written as an enhancement to the picture class, or perhaps a subclass for it. So one of the things that we have available to us is a way of getting pixels 2D, and I'm just going to call that method. So I'm going to get something. It's going to be an array of pixels. In fact, it's going to be a two-dimensional array of pixels, and that's totally wrong. It's not plural. If you look at the project, the class that defined a pixel was pixel singular, which makes sense because it's just one of them. So I've got a two-dimensional array of pixels, of pixel elements that I'm going to call pixels. So this will have multiple pixels in it, and they're going to be arranged in rows and columns. And I'm basically going to just call the get pixels 2D method that's part of my picture class. Actually, I believe it's part of the simple picture class, but the picture class extends it so we have access to it. So to make it clear, I'm going to just call I'm going to say this dot get pixel 2D. ELS, and I believe that was plural, get pixels 2D, and that's a method call. And what it does is it basically just grabs all the pixels in the image and sets them up in a two-dimensional array with rows and columns. And now it's time for us to traverse that array. So we're going to begin with an outer for loop, and we're going to set up a variable called row. So for int row, and we'll let that equal, we're going to start at 0, and we're going to continue as long as row is less than pixels.length, length, and then we'll increment that by 1, so row plus plus. So this will take care of the entire one row at a time. Inside of each of the rows, we're going to traverse, we're going to go down every single column value. So for int column equals 0, and we'll go ahead and say keep going as long as column is less than pixels. And let's pull out that first array from it, the one in the 0th element dot length, and then column plus plus. Okay, so now that we're here, we are in the meat of the nested for loop. So now we're ready to start doing things, and what we're doing is we need to grab the blue and decide if blue is bigger than a certain value. If it is, we're going to increase our count. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab I'm just going to define a variable. I'll call it int blue, BLUE. I don't think I've used that yet, and I'm going to let that equal to pixels at our current row and our current column. right? So we know that we're going to hit row and then go all the columns, and the next row and all the columns. So we're going to get them all. And when I do that, what I'm doing right now is this is now a pixel element. It's a pixel object, right? Int blue equals pixels at row column. That is a member of the pixel class. And that's not what I need. I need an integer. I'm not looking for a pixel here. I'm looking for an int. But it happens that the pixel class has a method called getBlue that returns the blue value for that particular pixel. So now that I've got a particular pixel, I'm going to call the getBlue method, and that does return an integer. So this int, right, that's stored in this pixel is going to be stored into this variable called blue. So now I know my blue level for this at this particular moment. And here's my simple if statement. I'm just going to say if blue is greater than value. That was the value that was passed to us at the very beginning, right? This is the one that was passed to this method. If blue is greater than value, I do one and only one thing. I just say count plus plus. So I've just increased the count of pixels that have blue above this value. So now I'm just going to close up my bracket. So here I am now closing my outer for loop. No, that's closing the inner for loop. Now I'm closing the outer for loop. Now I need to return the count, right? Now that I found it, return it, and then finally I'm just going to close the method. These are looking terrible. All right, I'll practice later. Right, so at the heart of this, I think the thing that probably you want to make sure you review just a bit is the fact that the picture class and the simple picture class both have this way of getting all the pixels in an image called getPixels2D, and then be sure you're aware of how to pull out how many rows and how many columns a particular picture has, and then remember that when you call pixels at row column, that is a pixel, and then you're calling the getBlue method on that particular pixel. And if you look at the return type for that method getBlue, it does return an integer. And then there's just this quick comparison between the blue that we have and the value that we're looking for. If the blue that we have is bigger than the value, then we're going to increase our counter, and then make sure you return it at the end. I hope you found this helpful.